Hi, in this lecture I'd like to walk you through the content and the format of this course. So this is the course guide lecture. It's a good idea to take the next few minutes and listen and watch this lecture so that you know what's coming up and be appropriately prepared. So let's get started. In the first section, you will go through the introduction. There are several lectures in this section. In the introductory section, you will learn about the details of this course. What is this course about? And you'll also have the opportunity to look at the two lectures that walk you through the various tools and parts that are required in order to successfully complete this project. The last lecture of this section is the one where we try to analyze the problem of the light following and obstacle avoiding robot so that we know exactly what is it here that we are dealing with. And we are going to be using the information in this lecture to design the robot that will solve the problem appropriately. And then we'll move on to the second section, which is the one on the microcontrollers and sensors. So that's the section where first we'll have a look at the features that make the Arduino Uno a very good option for using in building a robot like the one in this course. And we'll also look at the specifications and the features of the light dependent resistor and the ultrasonic distance sensor, the two kinds of sensors that a robot will be using. There's also a lecture in here that matches the problem specifications with the features of the photosensors and explain how we can use the photosensors in order to address the problem's requirements. Then we'll move on to a section on motors. So that's the third section. In the section on motors, you will learn how to use the continuous rotation servo motor. And in particular, you learn how to calibrate the motor, especially its neutral position, and how to control the direction by which the shaft of the motors spin and the speed. And we'll also learn about the normal micro servo. That's the little servo that we'll be using to rotate the ultrasonic distance sensor on a 180-degree arc. Moving on, the next section, number 4, is about the chassis, and that's where we also do the mechanical assembly of this gadget. The chassis is very simple collection of mechanical components that allow us to assemble the various other components onto it. And it provides us with a frame on which we can mount components. So we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about the chassis. Then we'll start the process of assembling it by starting with the motors and then moving on to things like the breadboard and the Arduino itself and the sensor motor assembly and so on, until eventually we have the physical parts that make up the robot all assembled. Next, in section number 5 is where we do the wiring. Now this is the part of the course that is the most detailed in terms of how much effort you need to put in, how much time you need to put into this section. And this is where it's also very easy to make mistakes. So I take a lot of time to step by step and very gently introduce the various wiring options and explain what each connection is for, and also test it, of course. Test it again and again and again to try and avoid errors. So we'll be wiring the motors, then the sensors. There's also a potentiometer that allows us to calibrate the sensitivity of the light sensors. And finally, we'll work on the batteries. Then the moment of truth arrives. Up to the previous section, by the end of the previous section, we had everything assembled, but we didn't really know whether the gadget actually worked. So in this section, we will be doing a lot of testing. We'll be testing the batteries first, then spend a bit of time on the bench doing some preliminary tests to make sure that the sensors, both the ultrasonic distance sensor and the light sensors, kind of behave as expected. And then we are going to go on the floor and do a real test. That's when we'll discover problems, especially with the firmware part of the robot, and through a few iterations or a few trials and errors and modifications using information that we get from our tests, we will improve things until eventually our robot works in a satisfactory way. I'm also going to show you here how to use a Bluetooth module to implement a very simple wireless telemetry system. By the time that we finish all our testing, we will have a robot that works pretty well. But there is still some room for improvement. Remember that we are interested in producing a refined solution to our problem. So that's what we're going to do in the second last section. In this section, we are going to take the design that we tested and we implemented in the previous lectures, the one that is implemented in a very messy breadboard, and convert that into a nice finished product on a prototyping shield. So I'm going to show you what the prototyping shield does and how it works. Then we'll walk you through the process of placing the components on the prototyping shield and soldering the components in place and then doing the wiring. And finally, of course, there's the testing. And that's about it. In the very last lecture called Recapping, I'm just going to remind you all the nice things and amazing things that you learned in this course and give you a few ideas on things that you can do with your robot from that point onwards, because where this course finishes, a lot of more fun, a lot of other ideas and things that you can do with your robot begin. So I hope that this course guide and the walk through the course gave you a much better picture of what's up ahead, and that by this time you are eager to get started.